In February 2022, the world woke up to shocking news. Russian invasion of Ukraine had begun. Missiles struck cities, tanks crossed borders, millions fled their homes. And it isn't just about territory. For Russia, Ukraine represents history, identity, power, and survival. So the real question is, why does Russia want Ukraine so badly? It was called Kievan Rus. Its capital, the city of Kiev. This kingdom is considered the cultural and historical origin of modern Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. But after Mongol invasions destroyed Kievan Rus in the 13th century, the region fractured. Ukraine while Russia emerged from the growing power of the Grand Duchy of Moscow rule. Eventually, the expanding Russian Empire absorbed much of Ukraine. From Moscow's perspective, Ukraine was never a foreign country. It was part of the same civilization. After the Russian Revolution in 1917, the region was reorganized under a new superpower, the Soviet Union. Ukraine became one of its largest and most important republics, and it was incredibly valuable. Ukraine had fertile farmland, the breadbasket of Europe, massive industrial centers, strategic ports on the Black Sea. Cities like Kharkiv and Donetsk powered Soviet industry. In fact, Ukraine produced a huge portion of Soviet steel, coal, and military equipment. Losing Ukraine would mean losing one of the Soviet Union's most valuable territories. Then came one of the most dramatic events in modern history, the dissolution of the Soviet Union. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed into 15 independent countries. One of them was Ukraine. Suddenly, Russia lost millions of people, massive industrial regions, and key military bases. For many Russians, this was not just a geopolitical loss. It was a historic humiliation, the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. And Ukraine was the largest piece that broke away. But history alone doesn't explain the conflict. There is another major factor, security. After the Cold War, many former Soviet-aligned countries joined NATO, countries like Poland, Estonia, Latvia. For Russia, NATO expansion looked like a military alliance moving closer to its borders. If Ukraine joined NATO, Russia would suddenly have a powerful Western alliance right on Moscow's doorstep. From Moscow's perspective, that would be a serious strategic threat. Ukraine also holds enormous military and geographic importance, especially the Crimea. Crimea hosts the port city of Sevastopol. This is the home of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Without it, Russia's navy would lose a critical gateway to the Mediterranean. In 2014, after political upheaval in Ukraine, Crimea has always been a
separate part of Russia.
It annexed Crimea during the annexation of Crimea by the Russian Federation. But for Russia, controlling Crimea was non-negotiable. There is also an ideological dimension. Some Russian leaders believe Ukraine and Russia are one people. President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly argued that Ukraine belongs within Russia's sphere of influence.
And a valuable part of our own history and culture.
But many Ukrainians strongly disagree, especially after pro-European protests known as the Euromaidan. These protests pushed Ukraine closer to Europe and away from Russia. To Moscow, this shift meant losing influence over a country it once dominated. All these tensions eventually exploded into full-scale war. The Russian invasion of Ukraine became the largest conflict in Europe since World War II. But at its core, this war is about more than land. Ukraine sits at the crossroads between East and West. And for Russia, losing Ukraine means losing a critical part of its past and possibly its future. The battle for Ukraine is not just a war between two countries. It is a struggle over history, influence, and the balance of power in Europe. And its outcome could shape the world for decades to come.